Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner. I'm a programmer at TIFF now, and this is the other thing I do. Happy Halloween, by the way. My guest this week is Sebastian Back, a writer and director whose first feature, Verona, an atmospheric drama starring Kat Kahn as a young woman weighing her choices and her future after the death of her grandfather, had its world premiere earlier this year at the Kingston Canadian Film Festival. It's opening theatrically in Toronto this Friday, November 3rd, and screening in landmark theaters across Canada on Monday the 6th, and you should check it out. Sebastian picked a film that's weirdly perfect for a Halloween episode, Bete, which is also known as The Beast, the 1975 art house erotic fantasy horror film from Polish writer-director Walerian Borowczyk. Set in a remote estate where an American woman arrives to marry a French aristocrat, only to discover the family legend of an 18th century ancestor and her monstrous lover, it's a spectacularly graphic work, with depictions of sexual activity and organs, specifically, that aren't often seen in mainstream releases. It was basically considered pornography at the time, and it probably still is, so obviously, listener discretion is advised. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Well, not that it isn't this, but I didn't want to pick a typical cinematic masterpiece or something that's you know what I mean? I don't know. I watched it, I think sometime last year, and I just was this is wild. And I was just in Paris, and I saw I was staying at a friend's place, and they had a poster for Bete on the wall, and I was because I was thinking initially when Laura hit me up about it, I was we could do Possession, which is just it's just a great movie, and I love it. And then I forget what the third pick was that I sent you. But anyway, I saw the poster on the wall, and I was yeah, that would be fun to talk about. I just thought it would be funny to talk about Bete. I think it's a cute, I don't know. Yeah. And I'm just fascinated with cinema and eroticism and nudity and where the line is with, it's I'm pretty sure Pornhub has an archive of every nude film in a movie ever made.
I would expect, yeah, at this point.
So there's kind of not an official archive, but there's this sort of this sexualization of nudity in cinema that's I don't know, as soon as you put nudity in a movie, you almost you're almost guaranteeing that's going to end up in a pornographic world. But then there's movies that are super erotic or quote unquote erotic or pornographic, and they sort of somehow cross a different line. I don't know. I don't really have any I don't have a coherent this is my thoughts on the whole situation. I just think it's a weird element of cinema, and I think it's really funny. I thought it'd be fun to just chit chat about it.
Well, having come up through the VHS age, where way back, I'm old, but in the 80s, the late 80s, I worked for a company called Jumbo Video, which was the sort of challenger to Blockbuster. So their business model was that when you set up a new store, they just ship you crates of tapes from all over the place, from the other stores, from bulk purchases that they'd made. So we'd get these pallets basically of used VHS tapes. And because we were in Ontario, we had to pull the stuff that was banned, because Ontario at the time was actively banning horror films and adult films and various things for content. So to go from an age where these, a film like Bete would never have been permitted for its, even though the phalluses are makeup effects, right? None of it's real.
Yeah.
There's enough explicit erotic / adult material that film would never have been released, and you couldn't carry it in a store, even a store that had a sectioned off adult room. To go from that to a time now where images from that film can just be accessible even on YouTube, just because they're protected under the fantasy side of it, because there's no way this is actual technically pornography. It is, but it isn't, but it is, but it isn't. And the fulcrum that that film lives in, and the thing that Borowczyk was playing with, where he really just wanted to make stuff about naked women masturbating. I mean, that's just his
Yeah,
deal.
yeah, that's literally, yeah.
I've
Yeah,
seen his
totally.
work. I understand it. But the ways in that he chose were these increasingly absurdist.
Totally.
Yeah, and I don't know where that fits now. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know where you
Mm,
find that sort of thing right now if it isn't sort of like animated deviant art pornography. To see it done with
totally.
real people and real props is weirder and even more jarring, I think.
Totally. And I think like and to be honest, I mean there's like I think like the sort of like the overall premise of the film I find, like I said, kind of just like entertaining as like a thing. But genuinely there's like an artistic, like the cinematography in it is incredible. And like the sort of surrounding like artistic touches of like the like illustrations of like bestiality and like all these like the just like the artistic value is like super interesting. But I and it's like there's something kind of genuine in the movie that I think is a bit endearing. At least when I watched it for the first time, I was like, there's something here. There's like this guy's trying to say something, but he's also just like really horny. And and I feel like the one element that's still kind of like wild is like the bestiality element.
Yeah.
Like that it's about, you know what I mean? Like that is like that's like something that's still kind of, I think, tricky for people to uh explore content wise.
Oh, very much
Um
so, I would think. Yeah.
like, you know, like it's, yeah,
I'm having a hard time trying to figure out how to set this up in the introduction. Just, you know,
totally. Yeah.
what language will I use? How do you frame it?
How do you, yeah. What are we talking about today?
And how do you
But
let
it
people
was,
know as well that it's safe? Right. Like it's a non-exploitative version of the thing that is the
that
thing
it
inevitably
is.
that they're picturing. Sort
Yeah.
of. Kind of.
Yeah. I mean, I think what was interesting, I like the quick tangent that I thought of, well, when you asked that was like, or like the element of like the film that's, you know, how does it get explored today, or can it be explored today, or like what's, I don't know, like what's the modern version of it. There's a book called, I think it's either called The Bear, like either just Bear or The
Oh,
Bear.
Marion Engel's book,
Um,
Bear. Yeah.
yes, yeah. Have
From
you
right
read
around
it?
the same time, right? From 1970 something, I
Is
think.
it?
I
Yeah,
believe so,
yeah.
yeah. I have read it a long time ago, just because effectively it was a dare. You know, it was one of those things that we were told
Yeah.
was so weird and so strange that you couldn't possibly. I think I must have been. You know what? I'm gonna Google it right now before I make
I'm
any
Googling. Yeah, me
definitive
too.
statements.
I know. I'm trying to
I,
figure out
I,
when it was like
in my head, it's
1970,
1974.
1970, 1976.
Okay, because I read
Yeah.
it in university, which would have been 1987, 88, I think, or
Okay.
1990. There were two different
Okay.
gigs. But it was one of those
Because
things where it was, it was hailed as this berserk Canadian landmark that such a book could exist and be taken seriously. But the book is actually really interesting, and the themes it opens up are, yeah.
it's amazing. I read it last year. Someone recommended it to me. I read it. Or no, actually, I read it, I think, maybe 2 years ago. And then I was home in Canada this in March, and I reread it. And genuinely, like the premise of it, which for, I mean, anybody who's listening, it's about a woman who like moves to I guess like mid northern Ontario to research like an old colonel's abandoned house, and there's a bear that he's kept there, and then she ends up having like a romantic and sexual, maybe not even romantic, but like a sexual relationship with the bear.
Hmm.
And the premise of it sounds ridiculous. Like you're like, what the fuck? Like, come on. But then you read the book, and what an incredible exploration of that idea. And you like, by the end of it, I don't know, I just was like, wow, I like really, that was really touching, really beautiful, uh surprisingly genuinely erotic, and the transformation that the character goes through in it in the book is quite like incredible, but also like subtly executed. And like, I don't know, to me that's like the I haven't thought about it before like this, but then I'm like, oh, like this is kind of like the better version of La Bête. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like
sort of. It
not the better, but like the masterful version of it or something. I don't know. Like there's a correlation there.
perhaps a more conscious version, or a more, enlighten's the
A
wrong word,
more,
but self-aware.
I mean, it's more feminist than the other one for
Oh,
sure.
very much so. Yeah, 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 yeah. It would. I think I don't
Um,
remember the book clearly. I remember the feeling of it more than anything else. And I just remember it being about
mhm,
loneliness and isolation and the need to control the world around you.
totally.
And
There's there's that element for sure, which is super strong. But what I had forgotten and what I came across when I was rereading it is the revitalization that she experiences
mm,
by the end of the book. And I remember this like um there's part of like when she's leaving the island again and she's just feels like she's like I think she looks at herself in the mirror or something like that, or maybe she's just like I can't remember. But anyway, she's when she goes to the island, she's kind of this like pale gray creature that's kind of like been dulled by I don't know reading books and being in a basement for like 20 years at her job, and then she goes to this island and then has this relationship with this bear, and when she leaves she's like completely revitalized and like a transformed version of herself. And I reading it this time I was like wow, I was like that's crazy. Anyway, yeah, fascinating book.
yeah,
um
Labette does not
yeah,
quite allow for that sort of level of transformation. Uh,
no it doesn't.
yeah,
No. If any transformation, I don't think there's very much in it. It's not about the story. It's about like just this scenario this guy wanted to set up. You know, he was like, "This is the scene. We needed to cover like bestiality, various other fetishes, and feet. And then we have to build up to that. That's what this movie's about, and we're gonna go for it."
yeah. I mean, there is something truly remarkable about the commitment to focus. Like
Totally.
the need to do this thing is the animating force, not that he wants to make a statement or tell a story in any other larger sense. It's just this image that has clearly been stuck in his head that he needs to get out.
Totally. Not
And
only that he needs to get out, that he like because I'm like, we all have our things,
mm,
but that he's like, yeah, I want to make this movie. And also like having made a movie, I'm like, that's an undertaking. That's a lot of like that's a commit that's like you said, it's a commitment. This guy was like, I'm not only do I have this idea, but I'm going to express it through filmmaking, which is an incredibly challenging and long process, like
right. No, I mean,
um
I would love to see the footage of craft services, just people standing around the table between shots trying to figure out what it is they've signed on for. Or maybe they were all in, like these are regular, he had regular collaborators. It's not like this was a one-off thing for him. And clearly, I mean, I guess the other side of it is that he was paying people, so it's fine. Like, why wouldn't you
yeah,
sign on? Nobody's getting hurt.
yeah. No,
But there is this
I think
bizarre quality to it that just speaks to a monomaniacal artistic perspective, which is not something
mhm.
I would assign to his films otherwise, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not the text, it's purely the subtext. It's like, this guy needed to make this movie and here it
Hmm.
is.
Yeah.
And you can step back, and that's every movie, as you say. Like,
Hmm.
nobody makes these things on a whim.
Hmm.
He's committing months of his life, if not longer, and then, of course,
Hmm.
touring with it, which is one of the things that he did subsequently, was like become the guy who does these movies. So you make your name on it, and you never stop
Yeah.
selling them.
Yeah.
But again, like, to hit on the idea that this is the hit, that this thing is what you need to do. And I've seen his other films, and
Hmm.
they're all kind of on a continuum.
Yeah.
Um, Aesthetically, he's making these sort of beautifully appointed, expertly decorated, really attractive looking soft focus porn films about this this thing that keeps
Yeah.
coming back around for him.
That's crazy.
Was this your first
I actually have.
exposure to him?
Yeah. I haven't seen any of his other films. I'm talking to you about them. I want to see more of them.
There are
Because,
box sets.
but
They're out there.
it's perfect Christmas present to myself. I think like oh shit, what was I missing? Like also because I mean we're taking it pretty seriously. We're taking his perspective on it pretty seriously.
Sure, yeah.
But also it's quite campy. And I wonder how much of it is, is there this like he's like, I got it. I mean, yeah, I guess there's an element where there has to be that kind of obsession. But there is like, but on the other hand, maybe it's just he's like, yo, what if we just let's dress this guy up in a badger bear costume with an immense penis and just make a movie with it, and that's just like the fun campy thing we're going to do for a couple of months, which I feel more that feels more endearing to me as like almost like the series of it's like gags in a way, like just like what if we I mean, but that's where the like that there's that line of like there are movies that are sort of like making fun of that level of eroticism, but then inadvertently end up kind of being it, or like they end up, you know what I mean? It's like you have like, I don't know quite how to describe, but like you have that like inadvertently just still part of it because people are naked. And then with this, it's like, yeah, it's like kind of campy, but then I don't know. Yeah, it's sort of it plays back and forth. It's like, is the camp there because he's like, haha, this is like fun and funny to make and people are gonna have like a weird time watching it, or is the camp there just from it could just be like part of the times,
Yeah, is it text or subtext? Is it brought on the set? I was thinking about the lead, Sirpa Lane, the actress, who seems to be giving a very deliberately over the top performance, but I don't know if that's what's been asked for, or if like, is he on the other side of the camera saying go bigger, or is that just her entire take on this thing where she's playing someone who's like a doe-eyed innocent who her eyes have to flutter and she has to rush her hand to her chest in shock? Is this because they're making a period movie and that's what her impression of a period movie acting is? Or is it because he wants her to be an almost ludicrous performance of the emotions that you would experience in this situation?
I mean, it depends because I'm not super familiar with her other performances, but I would almost, my gut would be like, oh, that's because that comes from like the porn side.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Or like the pornographic like world of like overperforming, and even like, I don't know, like the classic, like the cliche, like porn story, you know what I mean? Where it's like, it's literally just there for like this narrative is not important. It's just like, we need setup for this. And so the performances that go into that are like very
exaggerated,
subpar kind of thing, exaggerated, not good, like whatever. And so when I was watching it, I was like, oh, like this is just that, but there could be more to it.
I don't know. I mean, she made a bunch of movies with of questionable provenance, shall we say, Nazi Love Camp 27 and Charlotte and Caribbean Papaya, and really memorable titles from the 70s. And she her Wikipedia bio does say she was primarily known for B movies in the 1970s, primarily erotic and exploitation films. And she was a discovery of David Hamilton, who was, the guy who made Bilitis and a bunch of other weird, bordering on pedophilic exercises of soft focus photography of young women, very young women.
Crazy.
And he's a guy who fell out of fashion almost immediately as soon as his aesthetic revealed itself. And Borowczyk is at least playing around with adults. So you don't have the uncanniness of children in a fairy tale situation is removed, because this is definitely,
it's not like a totally.
It's not his thing for whatever reason, right? Like this is his thing. And you can't, and the beauty of auteur theory demands that I assign all of it to him, but I don't know that that's true. It's like it's just that this is the thing that survived of his work, right? He'd made an anthology film earlier, a couple of years before this, called Immoral Tales, and the story goes that Bete was supposed to be one of the tales that then grew out of it, and then they just realized there was more to do. But if you step back, it really does feel like a short film inflated to feature length, because nothing happens. Like progressively, in terms of plot, there's just nothing going on. It's just a woman having a dream over and over and over again.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And yeah, you see the scenes. I was skimming through it before just to kind of like walk the
Refresh.
memories
Yeah.
from it. Yeah, and there's like the the servant, also a very questionable element of this whole movie, who's like constantly just like having sex with this other woman in the, is that his like daughter or something like this that's in the,
Oh,
I
I
forget
think
whose
it's
characters, but there's
implied.
another,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, there's like this other, anyway, another nymphomaniac in the building. Um, and that just scene just happens 2 times in the movie. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, okay, cool. That's like, we're just gonna do that.
Yeah. It does feel like it may not be filler, but it definitely feels like it's footage that was plugged in from some other purpose.
Yeah, totally. But no.
Although if you're
Um,
making a movie about the aristocracy and, the inbred nature of these weirdos, then it would make sense that there'd be more than one weirdo in the house.
oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what I kind of, I think that's like what I love about this kind of film or films in this world. And I don't know if it's like, I feel like it's more in the world of like creating like perverse fantasies and less in the world of creating like a narrative. But I do like the idea that all these characters depravities or like and idiosyncrasies and the innards are all like out in the story kind of
Yeah.
thing. That people are living with their insides like out. And I just thematically in my life, in sort of storytelling, I think I just love that. I feel like there's so much that we have going on inside that like we would benefit from not quite keeping so close to the chest. Um, but at the same time makes the world around us kind of wild if we don't keep it so close to the chest. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like it's sometimes a bit better for the world around us if we're like a bit like closed off in a way, or we just like yeah keep up a certain element of like decency, but then at the same time we've all got like really wild things going on in our heads, and I like that people are out there making things that involve those wild things going on in our heads, and then they're just like, yeah, we're all thinking these weird things, you know. And if you haven't thought about it, or if you're saying that you haven't thought about it, you're probably lying.
Hey, it's Norm, interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week, I wrote about Ryosuke Hamaguchi's first feature, Passion, and Ben Wheatley's latest, Meg 2: The Trench, and took a look at the Mission Impossible franchise in advance of Dead Reckoning's release this week. That's fun, right? Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link in the Semcast Twitter account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out. The unconscious stuff that's going on even in this film, it's one of those better out than in circumstances, I suspect, where if he had repressed it, he either would have made either less effective work or more destructive work, or somehow cause self-harm. Like there's it does feel like we're participating in a therapy session on some level, that they're like, this is the thing that he had to show people. And my question and my thought is like, did he understand it? Does he understand it? Because there really is no larger commentary. That's the thing that's so fascinating about the film. It really just sits there.
Yeah.
And dares you to investigate it.
100%. And I think that's like, I mean, yeah, like you said, that's the fascinating part, is it's so like it's like not like remorseless, because it's not like it's doing something that needs to be called remorseless, but it's like, yeah, he's just like, this is this thing, and there's no explanation for it. There's no need to like, there's no self-justification or anything like that. It's just like, here's the movie. Like these things are happening. It's a wild, have fun, and then we get to talk about it and try to figure out like what the hell is going on.
Yeah. 50 years later, it's not exactly unpacking itself for us. I'm just more interested in the mechanics of it at this point. Really, I hadn't watched it in a very, very long time, but going back, it is just this. I mean, you need to pay you need very skilled people to make a movie like this. You need props and effects artists, and you have to have arguments about what color the fluids will be and so on.
100%. And like, I just clicked through, like, there's a scene with the beast and like a particular, it's giving her like cunnilingus. But I was like looking at the tongue and I was like, that's a huge tongue. And I'm like, how did they do that? Like, it looks super, super real. And I'm like, what did they do? How did they do that?
Yeah.
Like, it's insane.
It can't be like a beef tongue or something, because that's incredibly unhygienic and there's just no way an actor would allow that. But how do you simulate it? Like, your brain does make connections in the moment.
100%. No, it's insane. It's like, I mean, it could be, yeah, it's true. Like, I mean, it's not so much. So it's like they just work on it, and then they take that moment where it looks hyper real, and like the other 10 minutes was like, it looked like a stiff piece of like a fabric or like I don't know, just like looked like trash.
True. All you need is the 2 seconds to convince the eye.
Totally. I mean, that's the whole Jaws thing, right? That was like that shark was apparently supposed to be in the movie a lot more, and then they were like, yo, this looks terrible. So they took the best parts, and yeah.
You're on board at that point in the film. Doesn't matter at all. The Beast requires a different level of commitment, I think.
I think you're maybe right.
I can see people just immediately turning off the second it shows up and just giving up completely.
I mean, that's the part that's like weird, is like when you're watching a movie like that, for all of its problems and even problematic nature, there's like an element where it's like everything's campy and weird and kind of like trash, but then suddenly a moment of like eroticism or realism hits really hard and you're like, whoa, that was insane. And I think that's the strange part of watching films like this, is like when it does hit, it hits, and then you're like, it's disconcerting and hard to get away from. It's like, oh, I felt that way about, I mean, again, going back to, I think like Bear is a more like convincing like reality of this, but when you're reading the book and then suddenly you're just like, oh, that made me like feel a certain way, and you're surprised by it, and you're like, I shouldn't be feeling like this about like a woman and a bear, you know what I mean? And like, but then you're there and you're like, I felt it, like, what are you going to do about it, you know? And I think that's the cool part about like weird stuff like this. It's like, it's funny, it's weird, but then like, oh, you feel something and you're like, that's dark, and like and it reveals things about you. Like that's what's up. Like it's like, it doesn't, it like, that doesn't mean we're all like into like bestiality or something like that, but it does like reveal a certain thing about people. And I think that's like, I don't know, it's just, that's not to be like over the top about it, but like that's the power of art. Like that's like, you know, and it's, we experience it in so many other ways, like where you're like, you feel an unexpected moment of like beauty or joy or sadness or whatever. But it's, I think it's not the scariest, but it's like the weirdest when it has to do with eroticism, because it's like inescapable in a way or undeniable in a way. It's one of the most undeniable sensations to experience. And so when you watch art or experience things that have to do with that, I don't know, area of the body and the psyche, it's, I don't know, it's like, it's wild. It's like, and like I don't mean like wild in like a sexual way or something like that. It's just like, it's disconcerting.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. Yeah. It's that thing where I keep going back to Jim Rash's line in an episode of Community. It's like, oh God, please don't let this awaken anything inside me. Where
yeah, totally.
Sense that we are not fully in control of our own selves, right? Like our bodies, our minds.
100%.
Every now and then you're reminded. I think the jump scare does the same thing in horror, right? Like it's just a matter of pointing to someone and saying, look, I did this to you. This movie, this flat thing on the wall created that response in you. And maybe we did it with a camera cut or like a shock cut or a musical sting, but to do it with eroticism and to, I've been in screening rooms where people get very uncomfortable sitting quietly and you can just sort of
Yeah,
feel that experience roll through the room, and it's kind of great to be outside yourself and yeah, intimately inside yourself at the same time.
I agree. I think it's like, yeah, I think it's so funny that we're having this conversation about this movie too. Power of Art.
But
There's
that's it,
something
right?
there.
Like the impulse to dismiss it with a joke is also there because you don't want to think about it too much.
100%. Yeah, yeah, totally. Because once you do, then you're like, oh Jesus. Um, but also, I think that's like, not to go there, but like, I think that's like part of a problem we have culturally these days is like, maybe not culturally these days, but I always feel like there's kind of like almost like a fear of ideas or a fear of thought. Sometimes it's like we take those thoughts a little bit too personally. Like we have, like I know I was just talking about the undeniability of these sensations, but then at the same time, it's like, yeah, but that doesn't craft your character. That doesn't craft your life trajectory or say something so deeply impactful about it. It's just like you had an undeniable feeling, and now you can still like it's still okay to like have those things. And I think that's like, what am I trying to get at here? I guess like we can have undeniable feelings without having it impact us to a degree that's actually scary, or that's actually transgressive in a way. You know what I mean? It's like I think we're scared to have those undeniable feelings.
Yeah. Well, and the real fear is that someone will act on them, right? The idea that,
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Or that someone will judge us for having them.
and then what do you do? So everybody has to preemptively, like, you have to act to ban this movie because otherwise people might have feelings. As bizarre
Yeah,
as it
yeah,
is to
exactly.
imagine people having feelings to a movie
Literally.
like this, but it's simply an
Yeah.
acknowledgement that this is where we might go. And this, I mean,
Yeah.
I know time is kind of limited, so I want to make sure we
Okay.
get to this, but it's actually putting me in mind of what Verona as a film is all about, which is just people being willing to open themselves up to each other, and not in necessarily a sexual way, but just to be seen by the people around them and to sort of collectively exist, without judgment or condemnation.
Yeah, I think that was kind of the biggest thing that I wanted to do with the movie. And I think like it's funny because the actions, I guess, or like the moments that happen with the characters are like not so extreme. So I sometimes I wonder if that even really exists as much as I intended it to or not, but that's neither here or there. Um, I love the idea of like acting out and like what that does for people, and how we experience it. I think like the idea of like we talk a lot about expression, about being oneself, about like we talk a lot about all these good things. Um, but I think like people actually expressing themselves, people actually being themselves involves a lot of like weird shit and a lot of like acting out and a lot of like things that are actually like really difficult to comprehend or explain. Like people do things that like they don't even understand themselves. And then we can pretend to understand why we did them, or we can like, or we can, not to, therapy can help, but like at the same time, it's like you can go to a therapist and then we can have all these conversations, but like, oh, I did this because like whatever happened. But that's like one framework of understanding it, or like, one way of understanding an action, but sometimes we just don't know. Like it just had to happen a certain way, and um, whether we know why or not is almost beside the point. It's just like people are people and they're doing their thing, and um, I personally I have a harder and harder time with the idea that we need to like make any judgment calls about that. Like um, where the specific lines are drawn about like what's permissible and what's not, it's like that's a whole conversation. But I love the basic premise that like people are people, they're doing their thing, and acting it out is like an entirely appropriate part of that process. And I think we should be excited about that, like that there is an avenue through which we can express ourselves and that we can like feel. I don't know. I feel like when you have these like overwhelming feelings or overwhelming sensations, and then those are things that are not from art or not from whatever, but just like things that come up within ourselves that we have opportunities to like express them and not keep them in. And I think more and more people tend to like, I don't know, hold themselves from that kind of expression, and they like, people are scared of their, I don't know, their particular form of expression because they're worried that it doesn't fit into, like, I feel like when people say like you should be yourself, there's like actually like a whole host of like images that come with that have nothing to do with actually being yourself. But to like be yourself is actually like a really radical and scary thing to do, because it probably involves doing some like whack stuff and like being weird and maybe kind of like hurting some people in your life or whatever it is that you need to do to sort your shit out, you know? But I feel like that the weird stuff that you're really scared to do is like very, very important and very, very helpful in like realizing things about yourself and realizing things about the world around you. Yeah. I think that's like, yeah. And that's what I was trying to get at in the film.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what it is now is that we're in an age of kind of instant judgment and immediate censorship, and not censor with an O, but censuring, right? Like where people are just sort of ostracized for expressing an opinion. And to be honest is to be vulnerable in a way, on a multitude of levels, in a way that it hasn't been before. And to do it in an intimate situation, to tell someone what you need or what you want, that's the kind of thing that, we are like collectively discouraged from doing in a weird way. Like to the point now where Martin Scorsese can come out and make a movie that nobody wants to talk about because they'd rather ask him about the thing he said about Marvel movies 5 years ago. And it's just, that's a weird leap, but it's the kind of thing where, he was briefly honest and now I'm sure he regrets it just because it gets in the way. And if you bring in desire or you bring in connection, all of those things are complicated on an exponential level.
Totally. I think it's like, and I feel like there's nothing inherently bad about it either. I think people are like learning, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel excited about the idea of people kind of chilling out a little bit about what we say and being a bit more attentive to like what we're doing, how we're actually growing and changing as people, and not so worried about like, I don't know, like chit chat or like internet banter, stuff like this. It's kind of like, I don't know, it sort of starts to like, everything is like kind of the sort of like online cultural discourse is kind of losing its collective like grip. Like it's kind of just like all sort of, what's the word? It's like,
it's just turning into noise.
Yeah, it's not even like noise, but it's just kind of like the sincerity around it all is kind of like, it's sort of, it's really just like banter at this point in like a weird way. When I don't know, like
we're becoming more aware of the performative quality of it.
Yeah, totally. It's like, okay, like this is what happens when like a crisis happens. It's like everyone sort of like, this is the sort of streamlined way of like approaching things and etc. And then it kind of like, I don't know, at this point it's kind of like, it mostly just starts to feel like gossip, which is a really twisted way of, I don't know, that everything has kind of like gone. Like it shouldn't feel like that, but that's how it feels, and it almost feels inevitable. But then you have to think that once it gets to that point, then something maybe much better can kind of come out of it, which is cool. It's like, okay, we're like, the internet kind of has like a whole format now. It's like, this is how it goes. This is how things play online. So that's a really great place to do something new, or to like discover a new way of like exploring each other and talking to each other and having conversations and understanding issues and people in general. So it's kind of cool.
And then you lob something authentic and weird like La Bete into the middle of all of it, and you just watch it detonate like a bomb.
Absolutely. That's my next film. I'm gonna do a La Bete remake.
I'm sure the rights are not hard to get.
I'm sure it's gonna be easy to get. Stay tuned. It's gonna be wild.
That's great.
Verona 2 is just going to be about that.
Why not?
Yeah.
Maybe she fights it. Maybe she falls in love with it. You can say.
Yeah. No, it'll have to. I can't put those two universes together. It'll get to.
I don't know. I think there's a sort of a casual sensuality that runs through Verona that suggests that something otherworldly might just kind of wander in here or there. Those quiet little moments where there's nothing but tension between two people, and then it's pierced. That stuff's great.
Totally. I really wanted, I wanted Verona itself to be kind of like, not to be like a director that's like the location as a character, but like I did want the space to like play and the environment, like the humidity to be a character, or to be like, not to be a character, but like I wanted the air to be very present, that you can feel how like hot it is, you can feel how sweaty it is, and that everything is a bit loaded with this like this environment that's kind of contributing to what everybody's doing. That was definitely something I wanted to play with, and it's cool. It's cool that it comes through.
Yeah, no, it's a great visual element too, and it also it can't help but sensualize everything, because the less people wear, the more they feel like they're revealing, even though it's just like a bikini top because it's hot out. But there's still this extra level of immediacy.
Mm-hmm. And I think like actually this kind of the bridges between like what we were talking about and like kind of the film. I didn't explore it so much in this project, but I do find there's an interesting play between like eroticism and like nudity, where I'm really interested in like what you can do with eroticism when it has nothing to do with nudity whatsoever, and then like completely like removing the eroticism from nudity, because I feel like nudity inherently isn't like, it's not inherently erotic. That's like, maybe there's something, I don't know.
Well, it doesn't have to be, right? Like it
doesn't have to be.
Manner
like,
of presentation.
I don't think it. Exactly. Yeah. And like I love the idea of like, I don't know, I feel like anytime you're around any given person naked for like long enough, that becomes vividly apparent in a certain way. It sort of demystifies the whole situation. And it's like, anyway, I played a little bit with that in the film, but not as much as I wanted to be honest. In the original script, every character was naked at some point in the film, and never in like, and always in like a very sort of like domestic kind of casual situation. I felt like it was like a really quick way for you to become like very familiar with the character, obviously. But I didn't end up doing it. The restrictions around it from age and stuff was a bit much. So, but I still, with Bash, I still played a little bit around with that with Mackenzie when the two of them were on the dock together, and I was like, I feel like it's just like, this is like a completely, there's a bit of like tension there, but not really. And it's kind of this like sort of cursed, like loaded scene where you can feel conflict about to happen. There is no intimacy between the two of them. You can feel Camilla very much holding back. Anyway, so it kind of like, but then there's other scenes that feel more erotic, and people are like completely clothed, and this play between those two environments is something that's super fascinating to me.
My thanks to Sebastian Back, whose first feature Verona opens in Toronto this Friday, November 3rd, and screens in landmark theatres across Canada Monday, November 6th. Thanks also to Laura Steen. She knows what she did. You can find Sebastian online at sebastianback.com, and you can find The Beast on Prime Video in the US and on Blu-ray from Arrow Video, in a special edition with plenty of supplements that contextualize and expand upon Borowczyk's specific obsessions. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. Leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster when you can. I'll see you next week.